Good afternoon. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're at in the world right now. Welcome to Angular Accessibility Fundamentals. I just want to say before we get started, by all of you being here right now, this is going to be a wealth of information about accessibility within the Angular framework itself. But by you all being here, it lets people like me, Taylor, like Laura, know you all are being accessibility conscious and aware, right? And so that's what makes this so exciting for me and Taylor. I mean, right now I'm at a sit-stand desk and my legs are pumping right now because I'm so excited to do this with you all. So with that being said, who am I and who is the other person going to be screening with me? I am Mark Steadman. I am a developer services consultant at DQ.
My name is also Taylor, or my name is Taylor. I'm also a developer consultant at DQ. Sorry, a bit of a little pizzazz to get it going for you.
That's all right. That's how we roll all the time, right? So just a little bit of agenda for us. We're going to go kind of over just a general Angular accessibility overview. We're going to go through the general accessibility issues that we run into with Angular. We're going to review the main accessibility issues and provide solutions and guidance on remediating these issues. Believe it or not, this being a webinar, we're actually going to make this pretty interactive for you all that are on this webinar. We actually have some live guidance, live coding examples we're going to go through, in which we will be showing out all the different general accessibility issues that exist. And lastly, we'll end it with accessibility aids for Angular, so different UI component frameworks, development tools to help from an accessibility perspective, and as well as testing helpers that will actually help you all test for accessibility earlier in your life cycle. So, the overview of Angular and accessibility. Current state of affairs. So, for those of you who don't know, Angular falls under the broad spectrum of a JavaScript framework. And JavaScript frameworks in general have a weird stigma, especially in the web development community. And that stigma is they just are difficult to work with. They can't do the things that old school back-end server, front-end stuff can do, right? And from an accessibility standpoint, depending on who you talk to, some folks will just tell you flat out, don't use JavaScript frameworks like Angular. Don't do it. Do not use it, because if you do use it, you can't make it accessible. It's not actually possible. And that's just not the case. It really isn't. There's a stigma that goes around a lot of times that myself and Taylor, this is why we're doing this. We're here to tell you, yes, does Angular out of the box come with its own issues? Absolutely, right? But it can be made accessible. And it comes down to you as developers, designers, whoever is within the whole process of building your application to make it accessible. So just a quick look over. JavaScript frameworks direct all processing to the client side as an effort to speed up your web page. The site is loaded into a single frame. So Angular is loaded into a single index.html file. When the index.html file is loaded with whatever routes that are put into there, those pages are dynamically loaded into a single page frame. There is no refresh behind the scenes when pages change, and not all content is loaded in the DOM. So from a keyboard-only user, an assistive technology user, right, this is a huge issue. And we're going to talk about the different ways in which Angular can affect keyboard users, assistive technology users, with these same things we're talking about here, just changes between pages, dynamic content, right? You're going to hear us say dynamically refreshing content over and over again during this presentation, because it is a big issue that comes up specifically with it. And kind of a quote that we have is, the Angular team values accessibility, but a framework by itself cannot guarantee accessibility out of the box. That quote is absolutely phenomenal, because the Angular team, yes, it does have documentation on how to meet accessibility requirements, such as Aria attributes, right? Managing your routing focus, giving you a full UI library that is quote unquote accessible, right? They give you that. But the thing that we always see, me and Taylor being developer consultants, we work with developers to actually remediate accessibility issues within frameworks like Angular. We see this all the time where people will say, well, I'm using Angular. I can't make it accessible. Yes, you can. You can look at all this documentation that Angular has and say, hey, it says I can make it accessible. Okay, cool, I'll go back and do that later. Or, I'm just not going to do it that way. It happens. It happens so often. And the thing is that Angular gives you all the tools to make your content accessible, but you have to go out there and make it accessible yourself, right? And then in general, we always have this on here. There's an additional walkthrough guide on some criteria to solve when building a web page within Angular. Again, we're going to walk you through some of these issues, but again, just know as we go through this, the biggest thing is that it comes down to who develops it, designs it, everybody as a team working together and knowing that there are things that happen in Angular as far as it being a JavaScript framework that make it a little bit difficult from an accessibility perspective, but are 100% manageable from that standpoint. So I'm going to go ahead now, and we're just going to dive right into it. So I'm going to toss it over to Taylor, and we're going to jump into the general accessibility issues.
This mute button is not my friend today.
All good.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and dive in with a link here to get everyone started where you can follow along. If you want to, I think we'll post this in the chat here, and you can follow along with some interactive examples that we'll be going through during today's webinar. So there we go. I see that just in the chat there. Laura's posted it. Thank you. So we'll switch over to that example, and we're going to look at page titles. If you would open the app.component as well, Mark.
Yes, gotcha.
So you'll see that we have decided to add an extra, you can see where we have set title. This is a method that we're using of two methods that we'll be showing today. This uses the life cycle to set your page title, which is important because when you're routing from page to page or component to component, you want to be sure that your user understands that the content has been updated and that you can quickly explain to them what they're going to be seeing, what kind of content they can expect using that page title. So with this, you'll see that every page has My Awesome App as the title, and then quickly on each page, you'll see that it updates. And that's because we've carried this set title method through to each individual component. If you want to switch back to the code there and go to, any page title would be great. You'll see that we have this title service set title on our ng on init lifecycle component function. So this helps us set the title and keep it updated very quickly, very easily. But there is a second way to do it, and we'll show you using our navigation. We have simply made a set title function to be run on click, and that sets the, it updates the title when you click the appropriate link. So back on our page, you'll see that it updates home, Aria-live, focus management, so on and so forth. But page titles are really important. It helps keep your user in the know about what content to expect and what they'll be interacting with. So once you do change your page title, whether you are moving from page to page or content to new content such as a modal or dialogue or something like that, you'll want to be sure that you're managing your focus. And I think, Mark, you can pick up right there.
Yep, I gotcha. So the other issue that comes with Angular and pretty much every JavaScript framework, but it is a little bit different within Angular, is focus management page to page. So let me give you an example. Right now, you'll notice that I'm navigating through these pages right here. And you notice on Aria-live, the focus goes to this heading right here. We're controlling that. I'm going to go ahead, actually, as a keyboard-only user, I'm tabbing right now. I'm going to go to this focus management link that's in the left navigation of the application. And I'm going to hit enter. And you'll notice right now, I'm doing nothing with it, right? And focus is just staying on that left navigation. That's a problem. That's a major problem. And so what it is it causes a multitude of issues. So think about this. I'm a keyboard-only user right now. How frustrating is it that you change the page and I can't get to where I need to get to, the main content stuff? This is a very simplistic page. Think about a complex page, right? A complex navigation structure, whatever it is, I can't get to where I need to get to right now, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to show a couple different methods, and there's a couple different ways to manage focus that are acceptable in a JavaScript framework like Angular to move focus and properly manage it. One is moving focus to the first heading on the page, so preferably a heading level 1, like this one right here. You can move focus to the main body of the page. I'll explain why it's number 2 on the suggestions. And then you can move it to a skip link at the top part of your navigation as well, with a combo of an Aria-live announcement. Now, this move focus to the first heading. I'm going to show this in a couple different ways. The first way is actually if I go into my actual focus management page itself. Give me 1 second here. There we go. If I actually go into my focus management page myself, I'm going to use the component lifecycle. Okay, you heard Taylor say that the first time around, where we talk about focus management, or excuse me, using the lifecycle to set the title. You can see it right here. I'm saying the title of focus management. You can also use the lifecycle to basically on every single page component say I want focus to go to that heading every single time. So for instance, if I just have an H1 on the page, or I have a specific name for it, it'll go there. So I'm going to reload this real quick. Okay, and I'm going to go down now and tab 2 focus management. Go to a different page. Boom, I've got that. Go to focus management now. Oh, you didn't update, you jerk. That's all right. We'll go on here. We'll do it shortly on here. So I'm going to go ahead and click page titles, and I'm going to come back to focus management. There we go. And then focus will go directly to this heading. Okay, that's one way to do it. That's 100% acceptable way to put focus on the heading itself. It's using the focus, it's using the actual component lifecycle. Again, super duper simple way of doing it. A lot of people like to look for overly complex ways to do things. This is straight just using element reference from Angular and just saying, hey, find the native element, use a query selector, and put focus on it, right? Even so, you can make it even more simple by using JavaScript, using document, dot, whatever, and use it. And I'm going to show that to you here in just 1 second. So the other way to do it, so let's say I don't, okay, I'm designed an application, I don't necessarily have an H1, right, to put it on. The other option is to put it on the body itself. Now to do that, you would have to go into your index.html. Again, remember, Angular loads in one singular index.html file, and you have to put tab index of -1 on it, okay? Yes, a lot of people right now are going, oh no, like I don't think I can do that. This is also why I say it's number 2, because some people don't like to do that. However, it does simulate a page refresh when I click that every time, because focus gets reset back on the entire body of the page, okay? So what you can do is actually, if I go into my actual app component TS, I've actually created a function called onPageFocus, and every single page now, okay, whenever the router itself is called, I do not want to save the whole page, thank you very much, Chrome. Every single page now, whenever a route changes, it will load. And the way that it works is I just tie this into the router outlet. So for Angular, you're going to use a router to be able to go through stuff. So if you're going to say routers, router just means the ability to change pages, because they're called routes within Angular. So the router outlet, I can actually call this activate function. Woo, I can call this activate function. And this activate function, what it will allow me to do is actually be able to set focus on the body of my page every time the actual router is called. It's pretty effective in the fact that when this will actually run now, I'll go here, I can hit focus management, I can go down here and title, come back to me now, hit focus management, and now when I tab, first thing I go to is home, because it's been done, focus was put on top of the body. It's a very nifty way to do it, a very simple, simple fix for a complex solution, however you can do it. Now, the reason why I say body is the second one that I would do is because it is pretty inconsistent as far as what we'll announce along the way with it. Sometimes you'll get screen reader combos depending on your browser and system technology combos that will read the content like you just refreshed page. Sometimes it's just like blank, and it'll say blank. So it is a little bit more effective to put it to the heading right now, because the headings normally on pages will describe the page and its purpose a little bit easier than the whole body, but both are acceptable ways. And like I said, the last one, which I do not have an example for, but it's similar to the ways that you could do it, is putting focus on a skip link at the top, a skip to main content link, so that every time the page loads, a skip to main content link can be clicked and then pulled down through, okay? So that's focus management for pages. So you heard me say initially, we talked about dynamic content, right? And dynamic content is a huge, huge deal within Angular applications. And a lot of times pages don't even load. So for instance, this example I'm about to show you is super duper duper simple, okay? I'm gonna click this button, okay? A lot of times what we see, especially me and Taylor see as developer consultants, is we see people who have elongated forms. Let's say I'm filling out a form for like insurance, right? And as I click next, it doesn't actually change the page. It's just flipping out what component is showing, right? If you do nothing, what happens to your focus, right? Well, what happens to it? You don't know. So again, there's multiple ways to do this. You can use a component lifecycle. You can use actually CDK, which is a component development kit with material, to use initial focus, or you can do something which is actually pretty cool, which is create a directive that will actually put focus on your content whenever it loads or whenever you send true or false, and it can be used throughout the app. So what I'm going to show really quick is that directive. Now, directive is basically just the ability to add a quick attribute in a high-level nutshell. It's a quick ability to add an attribute to your component and then be able to use that across the app. So the attribute I'm creating that I'm binding to anything that is an input is called Aria-autofocus. Okay, I'm binding it to inputs, and basically I'm saying whenever this element appears, do this dot focus. Okay, whenever I use it. So how do you use it, right? So if I go, let me lose myself here. There we go. There's my button. Okay, so my button that's on this side here, and I know this is smushed over here. Let me see if I can get this to not smush. There we go. So this right here, this button I'm going to click, it has that toggle autofocus right inside here. Okay, and when I hit, okay, this if's going to show up, and I put that directive right there. That directive is going to take a Boolean that says true or false. Okay, and if it gets that component that I put this on the directive, boom, it's going to get focused right away. Okay, it's really nifty to do something like this. This has been suggestions that myself and Taylor have given to clients that we work with a lot, because focus management, again, in Angular, it's a load, and having something that's reusable like a directive to where you can just say Aria-autofocus and then true, right? Or you could just say Aria-autofocus, you can make it so that it runs on the initialization of the component, right? Small things to help you as an Angular developer be able to make your application accessible but easy, right? Make it easy on yourself to make that content accessible along the way. So a directive for an accessible focus, a directive for Aria-focus is something that's really, really useful, and it's something that we've been stressing a lot for reusability's sake within Angular. Because again, with Angular, your component development, right? And so reusability is huge. This is reusability, to be able to use this across the entire application while you develop it, okay? And the last little piece with focus. So you heard me talk about CDK, okay? We're going to talk a little bit more about JavaScript, UI component frameworks. Angular Material is the most popular with Angular far and away. But inside of Material, there actually exists a package called the CDK, Component Development Kit. And that kit itself actually includes a ton of accessibility add-ons. And one of them is a focus trap directive. And that directive itself will basically take care of trapping focus via the tab key, not anything else yet, via the tab key within something. So for instance, you could have a modal, you could have a form that you don't want somebody to close out of until they actually fill it out or hit next, right? So in this example right here, what I did is I still have this toggle next. So let's say I'm going to the next part of this form and I need this information. Let's say it could be a modal, anything else, and I don't want the user to get out of this. So if I keep tabbing, you'll notice it's just going to keep going and going and going and going in a loop, okay? Makes it easy. My code for this is I created all this content with label forest, and I just put that right there. CDK trap focus. Done. Focus is trapped inside all the actionable elements that exist on the page, and it goes through. Now, a word of caution. If you're using this for something like a modal, know that assistive technology users can still, they don't just tab, they use arrow keys to go into browse mode. So if they do go into browse mode themselves, they can still access the background content. So you still need to control that and be able to hide and show the background, hide and show the background content to those types of users. So again, CDK trap focus is extremely, extremely useful in the fact that it will allow you to trap focus at a click and just putting on something like that. and just saying trap focus here. Again, there's other ways you can trap it as well with directives to say, like, here's the first thing I want trapped, here's the second thing. Again, most popular with modals, and the other one is as well is using it within something like this where you go next. You don't want a user to get out of this until they answer a question. Vice versa, right? You'd always have a close button as well. This one doesn't have a close button, but just a quick example for using focus trap directives. And again, keyboard management is huge, okay, in Angular. And this one kind of plays in the next topic that we're going to talk about with Taylor. So from a focus management perspective, again, just you leave here with anything. Control your focus when it comes to stuff that needs to be in a natural focus order, from dynamically added content to page routing being the biggest one. And just know there are little things out there that allow you just to put a simple thing like CDK trap focus on something and trap your focus inside of it. So now, playing off of focus management, we're going to jump into keyboard navigation, which is also a large issue within Angular itself. So Taylor, I will toss it over to you.
All right. So keyboard navigation is incredibly important for a lot of users, not just those who only use the keyboard. And a little note that if your website is functional by a keyboard, it's more likely to be functional with other assistive technologies as well. So just that's a little bonus to keep in mind. A lot of people assume that to make their website keyboard navigable, they should add tab index to whatever they think should be in the tab order. This is often not the case, and you should be careful with adding extra tab indexes, especially just random tab index 0 or anything positive other than 1. So I think that's something to also keep in mind. So you want your website to be keyboard navigable, but you're not sure how to do it. The first thing to keep in your head is to use semantic HTML. That is probably the biggest rule of all, is just use semantic HTML where you can, and most of your accessibility, a lot of accessibility will fall into place. You have a lot of out-of-the-box functionality that gets included with semantic HTML that may not be included if you start building your own custom components. Which that kind of leads us to this custom components example here. We see a lot of divs and spans as buttons. So we've mocked that up here. And you'll see that one of these examples, let's look at the code. And you'll see that one of these examples is a div. We've added a role of button and a tab index of 0. But say that we didn't add that tab index of 0, that we forgot that, or say we forgot the role of button. Let's take that tab index off real quick. And now if I try to tab through the example, you'll see that it skips that test button and it goes to the actual button. I'm not sure if you can see that focus indicator there. It's quite light, but the focus skips over the test button because it's not included in the tab order. So this is a case where we would recommend adding that tab index of 0, and be sure that you have the appropriate role on your div or span or whatever element you're choosing to use. But instead of doing this, you could just use a button. And in that case, you'll get the click event, you'll get your keyboard events, you'll get all the native functionality of the button without having to do any of the extra work. And you'll see that once we click on both with the keyboard using enter or space, one will present an alert and the other will not. So test button is not operable with the keyboard at all. Yeah. So that kind of looks at why we should use semantic HTML, how your app should be keyboard navigable, but use tab index wisely, and be mindful of injected or dynamic content, which can often be a problem with a lot of different component libraries and frameworks and things like that, which we'll take a look at next.
Cool. One more thing just to add to what you had there too, Taylor. With this, when we're showing semantic HTML, why we should use it, you'll notice we have 2 click events on these buttons, right? And the one killer is that if I just have a click event on a div with tab index of 0 roll button, you want to know what Angular does with that? You can hear me press and enter. It does nothing. You have to control your key events yourselves. You have to be able to do that going through, and that's an absolute killer on that, because Taylor stressed it perfectly. Semantic HTML is like, Taylor, how would you describe it? It's like a dead language at this point for some people when they develop an Angular, right?
A lot of people love divs.
Yes, it's divs and spans. I mean, at this point, we've seen divs and spans be text boxes within Angular. Why it's always in these web developments, or why it's in these JavaScript frameworks, we can make a guess and decide that because a lot of people see it more as like one JavaScript framework, right? I don't necessarily have to use HTML. I can do some cool stuff by making it divs, and the HTML doesn't matter. No. That's a big no when it comes to that fact, and using that with it. So I just wanted to add that to it, because again, she stressed it 100%. You got to use semantic HTML where you can, because it will just totally mess up your keyboard navigation within your application, and you'll have so much more work added on to it if you go back and do it later with it, okay?
And actually that brings up another point that I wanted to add about these custom components is not only are you responsible for your different click and keyboard events, but you are responsible for adding your roles and Aria attributes in the correct place. So we can demonstrate that with, we have this custom component called app left nav, and this is our navigation, but we forgot to add a role of navigation on it. So an assistive technology is not going to be able to pick up on the use of this content, what it's for. So we could go ahead and we could try to add this role of navigation here on the component level, but you'll see that this does not actually get added anywhere. Well, it gets added on that app left nav, but that's not the correct element that it should be added to. So this is really important. Not only are you responsible for your keyboard and click events, you're responsible for adding the role to the correct place. So there we would want to add it to our left nav component.
That's why it came through, Taylor, because I left that there.
Okay. Well, yes. In our ideal example, that was not there, but so you'll want to make sure that gets added to the correct spot, which in this case is that div that actually contains the navigation unordered list. Yep.
Yeah, so this is, again, another one, too, that is just all too common. And I'm sure if I say this out loud, everybody on here is going to be like, yes. Let's say where you work, you own, your company has a framework that they use internally, and somebody comes in and says, this has an accessibility violation, fix it. And you try to go put a role of navigation like we just did right there on the custom tag, it ain't going to come through. So now it's got to go back to that team. That team's got to fix it, put it up in there, right? Major problem. So getting accessibility early within custom components is where we want to be along that line.
And if you're not able to get into the source code and add that to the custom component, you can always take the choice of making a directive or using the component lifecycle to add those attributes as well.
Absolutely. All right, so let's keep moving for sake of time here. We're going to jump into Aria-live. So Aria-live in Angular, Aria-live involve alerts in Angular. This is going to sound funky, but this has been a pretty steady way. If you don't know what Aria is, it's successful rich inner applications. It's attributes you can add. They'll make your site more accessible. Aria-live has been a good way to give notifications to users and status change, types of announcements, right? Using async events like Angular does to inject content, this can cause the announcement to not happen at all. And what I mean by that, Taylor and myself have done some pretty extensive testing with this. So Aria-live works like this. On load of a page, an assistive technology user will be made aware, similar to like this, right? This right here, let me inspect this for you. Okay. This bad boy right here, dynamic click event is plain old boring content. If I click this switches. Aria-live server will say this content has been created in async. My difference is I actually have this div that I created. It says Aria-live equals assertive on it on the page on load of the page. So assistive technologies are able to pick up on that on load. Where you will get horrid, if not no result from it, is when you do something like this one down here, okay? You'll notice there's my button, but there's no Aria-live on the page itself. So I'm going to click this, and now I injected an entire paragraph tag with Aria-live assertive on it. The results you get back from this are very, very shaky, okay? I've seen this over and over again where we will have people say, well, we have an Aria-live assertive, why isn't it working, right? Boom, this is why. Because you're dynamically adding content in, you're not giving assistive technology time to pick up that this actually has Aria-live assertive on the tag itself. The surefire way to make sure it is have a live region somewhere on your page as a reusable component or something to that effect that allows you to be able to sync that content in and out. I'm telling you, if you have a component right now that you're injecting with Aria-live on it, you're going to get mixed results. Sure, if I showed this to you right now using VoiceOver, right, it might work for us, and you'll say, "Ha, Mark, you're just blowing smoke." Trust me, you don't want to deal with it. You want to be able to say this works 110%. Do it that way. Same thing with role of alert, right? Role of alert's more used if you put focus on something. However, if you put focus on something and dynamically at the same time, you're on the risk again of not having that announcement of alert when a user is made aware of it. Okay, and so this one, there's not too many coding examples to show because it's more of an awareness for it. But having that live region that lives on your page instead of dynamically adding it will just greatly improve the accessibility of your application. If you are even saying, well, we don't really have that, we want to go the easier route, pulling something in. The CDK, which I talked about before, which had the focus trap, actually has an accessibility Aria-live announcer. It's a little cumbersome to put together, but it does the same effect. That first one that I showed here, the dynamic click event, it does do the same effect as that with it. So takeaway, Aria-live regions have to be on your page somewhere, okay, when it's on load. It can't be a dynamic swap in and out with like an ngIf or like destroy build, whatever it is. You can't do that. It's going to be too inconsistent result. Is it getting better? Sure, absolutely it is. A few years back, I could tell you, you couldn't even get an announcement to go, but it is getting better from that perspective, okay? So that will take care of Aria-live, and that will kind of take care of the demo content we have right here. Again, please, if you want to, please, by all means, go ahead and use the example library or sample library. Jeez Louise, it's Tuesday. The component harness that we just showed right there, and mess around with it. By all means, we made it just so you all can use it, fork it, whatever you want to with it, and just go through the examples with it, okay? The last general accessibility issue we're going to talk about, and again, we don't necessarily have examples for it because it's really good just to kind of get this out in the open. Component libraries, okay? One of the great things about Angular is the ability to use multiple UI component libraries to make development easy and effective. Angular material is used by literally, at this point, Taylor, I don't even know. I think every single person we work with has used Angular material in some way, shape, or form, right? So with the ease of use comes a consequence that accessibility is left behind in UI component libraries. And what I mean by that is a lot of these will claim that they are accessible, okay? And what I mean by accessible, okay, my definition is accessibility advocate. Accessible means that every single component that you have created in this UI library is accessible and will allow you to be fully accessible by point and click. You will not get that with these, okay? Some of them are better than others, 110%. Will not argue with you on that. But it becomes extremely difficult on you all when you implement this because you, after the fact, have to make those changes. You have to fix the accessibility with it. I can tell you from a material standpoint, material is getting better from accessibility standpoint, but still it has its issues. So those are major UI component libraries. Now, smaller ones, okay, so we're talking, let's say I go out there, there's always small components. So let's say I go out there and I grab a list box really quick or a combo box and I say, I want to add this to it because it's really cool. Know that most of these small component libraries come with it. They introduce document structure issues all over the place. So when I put that component that I may think is awesome onto a page, guess what? It's going to cause major semantic issues on the page itself. Many of the components we're talking about only think about the components markup themselves and not the actual effect it has on a page. I can tell you right now, Taylor had mentioned this in the keyboard navigation. We've seen components that are basically just text boxes or excuse me, just plain old text, have a tab index of 0 because somebody went to Stack Overflow and said, guess what? This says I should have tab index of 0 on it. No, 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 no. Okay. Buttons, links, even input boxes, not using native tags. Input boxes somehow have become spans in Angular. I don't know why. Use a text box, use an input box. My goodness gracious. Okay. But that's what you get sometimes these component libraries, because you'll just put in a custom tag like you saw with that app one, Taylor had, and you'll go boom, boom, looks great, right? You forget to actually look at the semantic markup. Most packages try to make the most out of the CSS to design the best looking slick design. They choose ease of use for development, but you're going to see a huge misuse or overuse of Aria, and it's incredibly difficult to fix all the issues in the framework, because now you're talking about doing directives, you're talking about doing after the fact, using component lifecycle, JavaScript, right? Ugh, just listening to that, it's difficult. So just be aware, if you're using component libraries, be aware that there are issues that exist with it. So now I'm going to turn it over to Taylor again, who's going to talk about the top UI component libraries that we have gone through and researched ourselves.
Yeah, so these that we're showing you are they're the top based on downloads and usage. So you can look these up and find them yourselves. They are quite commonly used, and we've reviewed them just to see how accessible they are. And here's kind of a quick recap of the 3 top ones that we found. So we'll start off with Material UI. It is the most popular UI framework based on downloads and usage. I would say a lot of clients that we have worked with have definitely implemented UI, and it's been a challenge. It does use semantic HTML for inputs, but it does also require a little bit of extra work to ensure that things like radio buttons or checkboxes are accessible. It uses dynamically added Aria attributes, which can sometimes cause issues with certain assistive technologies. And it's not that easily customizable to add accessibility into your components, so you have to use directives or lifecycle events. Next is NGX Bootstrap, which is kind of split. It does have several fully accessible components right out of the box, but some other components require a little bit of work to be fully accessible. Another thing to note about NGX Bootstrap is that the date picker is not accessible at all. I think that brings us to our third one, which is PrimeNG. This one we would say is probably the most accessible out of the 3 that we've talked about just now. It's lightweight and easy to use. It uses accessible properties on tags to make components accessible. So like our app left nav example, where we were saying normally you can't add a role to that custom component tag. You have to go into the children and add it on the appropriate element, say div or span or what have you. In this case, PrimeNG opens those up and allows you to use certain accessible properties on the tags to skip that step of diving into the children and adding them there. It does also use semantic HTML for inputs, but like we said, it requires the developer to be the one to add those properties that ensure the accessibility. If you take anything away from it today, just know that developers are responsible for the websites that they make and how accessible they are. So definitely try to keep that in mind when you're developing. And last thing about PrimeNG is that the calendar and modal are still kind of lacking in out-of-box accessibility, but there are definitely accessible modals out there, and we'll have more information to share on that. And I think some upcoming blog posts, if I'm not mistaken. Right, Mark?
Yes, correct.
Perfect. So I think that brings us to some accessibility aids for Angular, and we'll dive into those. Mark, take it away.
Oh, sorry. So we've kind of talked about this. Material has Angular Material as a CDK. You've heard me say it a bunch. Component dev kit. It's a set of behaviors, primitives for building UI components. CDK contains an Ally suite of attributes and functions that can vary accessibility features easily into your project. So for instance, we talked about the focus trap. There's the live announcer, fully working live region. There's also color contrast options with it as well, which can help depending on if you have like a light or dark mode on your site, which some sites still do. If you want to set, or if you want to be above and beyond, do high contrast resolution, those are there as well. There's also multiple features that exist on it too. So I'm going to toss it back to Taylor really quick, who's going to talk about another tool that can help within your development process actually.
TSLint is a set of about 10 rules that are checked in your development cycle using Codalyzer, and it helps your process shift left. So you're keeping accessibility in mind earlier in the process. And if we can do that in design and development instead of in production, that's what we want to happen. So TSLint can be really helpful for that in checking like a basic set of checks to help you get a baseline for your accessibility issues and violations on your website.
Yep. And then playing off of TSLint as well, again, like Taylor said, this is as early in the development process as you could possibly get, right? You're linting your code. If you have it set up properly, you can do it as you're developing, or you can just do it, as a runner against your content when you build it. But with that, if you're an Angular developer, you know that Angular comes out of the box CLI with an end-to-end testing package with it. The end-to-end testing really just uses Selenium behind the scenes WebDriver. And we actually have an open source tool, Axe WebDriver.js, that'll fit directly in with the end-to-end testing that comes with Angular. So in your end-to-end testing, when you're building out those pages, why not run Axe WebDriver.js? What this will do is it will catch 50% of accessibility violations on your pages before that is even out the door. So why not add something like that? Again, if you're using a combination of TSLint, which is as early as possible in the process, and in your end-to-end testing, using something like Axe WebDriver.js and testing your content along the way, your content is going to be more accessible because you're getting accessibility, like Taylor said, you're shifting left. So we always say here at TQ is you want to get as early as possible in the process and be able to do that. So use Axe WebDriver.js if possible within your end-to-end testing. And so finally, for sake of time, because we're getting close to time, I want to make sure we have questions. In summary, at the end of the day, I say this, I've done presentations for React, I've done them for Vue, I've done them for an Angular now. At the end of the day, it all comes down to you, to developers, to develop content that's accessible and ensure that all the issues that we talked about today are dealt with properly and effectively. To designers, take the issues we talked about here and account for them in designs when knowing that the application is done in Angular. For anybody who is a project manager, content managers, right? Know that accessibility has to be baked into the content that you're basically divvying out or people are doing. Have it as a check before you get it into it, right? Show proof that it's fixed in the components you're testing as you go through. Because Angular gives you all the tools needed to make your content accessible for all, but it really is a matter of want to on the behalf of designers, developers, and everybody involved to make your content accessible. And I know by you all being here today, that is the goal for you all as well. And I want to say, just lastly, thank you, me and Taylor, for listening. And with that, we'll go to questions, Laura.
Great job, Mark and Taylor. Really great presentation. I'm going to dive into some questions here. So first one, Tom is asking, is it a good idea to set focus to a non-interactive element like text?
I can take that one. So in this case here, so we're talking about putting focus to a heading. And in this case, when you're putting focus on load of something or putting it in a logical focus order using tab index of -1, it's actually okay to do that. You're managing focus and allowing somebody to know that a page has changed and you're moving focus in a logical order. Tab index of -1 only allows you to put focus on it via JavaScript or scripting. Tab index of 0 will bring it into the natural tab order, and in which case here, right, we're not bringing it into the natural tab order, we're just using tab index of -1 on it to put focus on that text so that we can have a user in a logical way understand do that. But you should never put tab index of 0 on non-interactive text because that then brings that into the natural tab order and it won't make sense. They'll think there's some kind of action directly to that, and it's just not the case.
Great, thanks, Mark. Another question here. So the title of a page is dynamic. Does that mean it requires focus? Because in this situation, this person is asking, they use Aria assertive for dynamic content.
Can you read that question one more time?
Sure. Basically, they're kind of building on the point that you shouldn't make non-interactive elements focusable. But they're asking in regards to the title of a page, it's dynamic. So does that mean it might require focus? Because in their situation, they're using Aria assertive for dynamic content.
Okay. Yeah. So I think I know what's being asked in this question, and if I'm wrong, by all means, you can follow up with me. I think I have my email and stuff in here. So if I change, so think about it like this: if I'm a keyboard-only user and assistive technology user, I click a link, and I change my page title, but it goes nowhere, and you have a live announcement that says like the page has changed. Okay, you could get by with that, but what happens for a keyboard-only user? They have no clue the page. They have to move themselves all the way back around. Some keyboard-only users may only have a single finger or a fist to be able to move or tab onto content. So you got to think about it from a perspective of managing focus is key for this. I know it's a non-interactive element. However, there are scenarios where non-interactive elements can receive focus when it comes to just managing focus along the way. Now, if you click the link, page title changes, and you're doing a live announcement with focus management, that is awesome. That's like the super awesome solution, because now you're going to get a page announcement that's changed, your page style's changed, and you're going to get focus managed, whether that's on the body or the heading at that time, that allows you then to basically have a full encompass of keyboard only and assistive technology users. And again, more information you can give an assistive technology user, the better, because they can understand your content a little better too.
Great, thank you. Another good question here. For things like error messaging, for example, with a form validation, are live regions the best way to handle dynamically indicating that there's a new error message?
So I'm sure me and Taylor will have two different answers on this. So yes and no. It depends. So a live region can work for an error message. However, if it's a global error message, the normal thing that I would say is a global error message, sure, you could use a live region for. If it's just an error message just on like an input field, normally the suggestion we say is to put focus to the first item that's in question and error. Because let's say I have a form, and at the very bottom there's a submit button. I hit submit, and then there's errors above, right? I'm a keyboard-only user or an assistive technology user. Sure, I'll hear the Aria-live announcement, and I'll hear that there's errors. But think about all the traversing that has to go back up to the DOM to get there. Normally, I would suggest to just put focus to that error message. However, a global error message that says, let's say there's multiple fields in error, right? You could specifically do a live announcement for that to say there are some errors that exist. But again, that would also include some focus management. I mean, Taylor, do you agree with me on that, or is there any difference what you're thinking on that?
Yeah, I would say it pays to consider, whether, sorry, just lost my train of thought, whether you're just in one spot or, whether you have more to consider.
Yep.
Great. Question here. Do you recommend developers do manual testing with a screen reader, or just use a code analyzer and then leave the manual testing for QA?
So I will say I'm a developer at heart, but I've also been an accessibility SME at heart. You should have them do both. It's never hurts to learn how to use accessibility testing as far as using a screen reader or anything like that. But I would say 100% you would want to do that. And then as far as if you leave it up to QA or not, that's your decision. There are some teams that just do automation so like for instance, they would use like TSLint and end-to-end testing combo, right? And then go and leave QA to do the testing. However, and again, I'll ask Taylor's opinion on this too. My opinion is the more you know about accessibility testing, the more accessible content you're going to make, right? When you push that over to QA, now QA knows how to manual test, but your developers won't. So it's always good to have that trade. Taylor, what do you think on that too?
I would definitely agree with that. And when you learn how to test for accessibility, you learn how to develop for accessibility in a way. You learn what to look for and what to add or what to remove. So it definitely can't hurt to test it out yourself and see where you get or see what you have.
Absolutely.
Great, thanks both. Another follow-up question about code analyzing. Is Code Analyzer an accessibility linter?
Taylor, it's just part of TS-Lint out of the box, correct?
That I'm
Little,
aware of, yeah.
Yeah. So it's just adding in those rules for accessibility is already pre-built in TS-Lint. I will say this, there are some linters out there that do have accessibility in mind, but I don't think they go past like, do anything earth-shattering or anything like that as far as, more than what the TS-Lint one does. I don't think off the top of my head.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question, back to the error messages. What about putting a set of error messages at the top of a form page that are links to the fields that have errors that also have an inline error message?
So I've seen that as well. So that is that is one of those things where it's a design choice that's a little different from what I've seen. So I've seen something similar to that where you can click on it and go down and traverse through. You can do that. If you want my 2 cents on it, again, I'm going to ask Taylor's opinion too. If you want my 2 cents on it, if you do the links at the top that go like down to each field, in my opinion, you can do that. There's no real harm in doing that. However, your focus needs to go. You need to get focused up to that global error message, and then you can click on those fields. My opinion is that you put focus on that global error message and you let the user go through and decide. Taylor, what do you think on that?
I would agree, and I actually like that setup that you're describing, where it's much more thorough, where it has a global at the top, where it has links to the individual ones. But I would say definitely put focus at the top first and let the user pick which one they're gonna fix or correct or what have you.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool, thanks guys. Another question, when using Angular, does the focus control you're talking about work with mobile browsers and screen readers?
Yes. So essentially the focus control, Angular allows you to have a mobile view of your site, but if you're basically just using TypeScript or a combo of TypeScript and JavaScript to do it, which would be the same as rendering mobile. So yeah, you would get the same effect for all of that. The only difference I would say is that if you have a totally different design in modals, and you say like, hey, in a modal, for mobile, not modal, geez Louise. If you have a totally different design for mobile, then I would say, maybe there's some changes to like, instead of putting focus when you're going between page to page on a heading, you put it on the body, whatever it is, right? But really, it should be the same across the board unless there's a drastically different piece that you use for mobile.
Great, thanks, Mark. Another question here, are there any specific code validators for Angular, or would the output have to be copy and pasted into a validator?
So I'm going to try to bring that question back in. So code validators, I'm guessing we're talking like the TypeScript or the HTML for it. Because what I was going to say is just the best way to validate that content is we at the Q have an Axe extension that we use. The Axe extension allows you to see or render content and scan it. And that would be one validator. Again, it wouldn't be like a copy and paste output. It would just be what's in there. Same with your end-to-end testing then too. The other one, there is just a straight Axe core, which is our accessibility core engine, which you could use in the actual specs, spec.ts's that are in Angular itself, and run that and scan for each component that you're running against. That could get your raw HTML as well. I think I'm thinking, Taylor, am I off in that question, or I'm thinking that's what we're asking there, maybe. Yeah, I would say the way that we do it is you can use it within unit testing, or you can use it as like the axe, or use the axe scanning tool for a fully rendered page to get your content to test it.
Great, thanks, Mark. I think we got time for a couple more here. So what recommendations do you have for sticky components? For example, a sticky cart in the footer. As you select products, the sticky contents are updated, or perhaps an add to cart button that lives in the header or footer.
So, I can say my 2 cents on stickies, and then I'm sure we'll have two different things from Taylor and myself, just because the stickies are pretty all over the place. So sticky components, they can be difficult because sometimes from an accessibility standpoint, they can get in the way, especially if a lot of times when stuff overlaps and you're going through, especially in mobile view, stickies can stick over content. They can block content from being seen. So we're not even talking about at this point keyboard or assistive technologies. We're talking about just a cognitive user, right, who's looking at your site and saying, I can't see or understand this content because the sticky header is in the way, and it's kind of annoying. So the one thing, if you do use a sticky header, make it as lightweight as possible so it doesn't have stuff sticking all over the place, right, like sticking down and covering content by default, right? And again, the other thing with stickies, if you want something with that, is take a sticky header and zoom. Do Control+++ to 200% and see what happens to your site. Because sticky headers seem to, especially within browsers that you zoom on, take over your page. You can hardly see any of your content. So just make sure that you are aware that it can cover anything on there. Taylor, anything to add to that as well?
No, I think that was a good kind of synopsis of some issues that we look at. Zoom is definitely an issue that it kind of exists on its own, but
yeah, it's super fun.
With sticky items, as far as it being read in a screen reader or something like that, it's going to take it how the DOM reads it out, how the document object model reads it out. So if it's at the top of the page, it's going to be read at the top of the page. It shouldn't be read multiple times through the page, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great point. Great point.